Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting of June 10th, 2015. Okay, we have a roll call, please.
Noted for the record that all commissioners are present with the exception of Scott Cooper, who has an excused absence.
Okay, thank you. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible. Okay, we'll go right to public comment. Aye. All opposed. There was some last-minute communication. So, consent calendar, we have the minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes? Minutes will stand, and we need to move now to the public hearing. First public hearing is the Highbell Ranch Vineyards. This item has been continued from the May 27th.
Chairman Manfredi?
Yes.
I have to recuse myself because of proximity to this business.
Okay, thank you.
Outside?
Yes. It's nice out.
It's not raining.
No, it's not.
Thank you, Chairman Manfredi, members of the Commission. I'll be presenting the staff report tonight for this particular item. Trent Garangeli is here represent Highbell Ranch Vineyards. He submitted an application for wine tasting and retail sales at 1458 Lincoln Avenue, Suite 12, which is one of the rail cars at the Calistoga Depot. That particular location is in the downtown commercial zoning district. Wine tasting and retail sales in the downtown commercial zoning district require a use permit. The use permit primarily is to make sure that these types of uses are carefully planned in our downtown. We've taken a look at this particular application for security and safety. The police department has reviewed the application and determined that there are no negative effects based on the hours of operation. We've included a condition of approval that also reflects that particular hour of operation limited to 9 p.m. Another reason is to make sure that wine retail sales and tasting in the downtown also comply with the grape sourcing regulations for the city of Calistoga, which is that all wines poured at this tasting facility be either cumulatively 75% Napa Valley wines or all of them poured Napa Valley wines. Highbell Ranch Vineyard produces 100% of Napa Valley wines. They currently produce wines at their site in Angwin, which are grown there up in Angwin, Pope Valley. Then they also source grapes from other locations within the Napa Valley, so 100% of their wines are sourced from Napa Valley grapes. So it complies with the grape sourcing regulations for the city of Calistoga. Since the property is developed, we don't see that there are any particular design-related issues. All of the modifications to the site are internal. They're adding some fixtures and furnishings that would necessitate the tasting room and the retail sales. They have suggested that they will be doing some food preparations and sales to accompany the wine tasting experience. Based on our conversation with the Napa County Environmental Health Department, they would require a low-risk food permit. If that ever expands from prepackaged foods, they would have to elevate that risk level, and it would mean that they'd have to put in additional fixtures such as refrigeration and sinks. All said and done, though, there is enough room for them to comply with that if they ever wanted to expand that use. We don't see that there's any concern related to that packaged food sales accompanied with the wine tasting. I would just add that we are starting to see a fair number of wine tasting facilities located in our downtown, although we don't feel that they've yet become a particular predominant use in the downtown since they're spread out amongst Lincoln Avenue. And they are really, right now, each in their own unique facility. Like this one, it's located in the rail car, which is much different than a particular brick and mortar with frontage directly along Lincoln Avenue. I think that the Planning Commission has reason to grant this application based on the character of that site. And again, that we are a wine region, and in order to promote that wine region, we need to be able to accommodate these wine tasting facilities. So with that said, staff is supporting this use permit with the conditions of approval as contained in the resolution. I can answer any questions if you'd like.
Thanks, Eric.
You're welcome.
Any questions?
Yes, I do. Eric, you talked about their ability to serve packaged foods to a certain point, at very low level. I understand that.
Right.
I know that there's quite a few folks that are concerned with going past that point, becoming literally almost a mini restaurant kind of approach, and yet it's a wine tasting facility. You're also hearing that in the county with the wineries and all the things. When do they go to a point where they have to come back to see us?
Well, they have, under their O2 license and selling their own wines, they do have certain exemptions with the health department. If they ever want to taste other wines, then they'll have to come back to us for approval. If they ever want to be classified as a restaurant where they're actually having food production there on the property, they would need to come back to us and seek approval. But if they're limiting their sales area to less than 25 square feet and are only selling their own wines, they have certain exemptions under the Business and Professions Code.
And just a informational thing. So we have, I noticed you stated that we have roughly 10 tasting rooms at present. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct. Let me just verify here. We have one.
I think that was on page 2 of 3 and the very
Yes,
20.
we do have currently 10 plus 11 with this one.
Do you know how many retail we have in town? Do we have 100 retail establishments?
We are exceeding our concentration for wine tasting and retails, but it's very low because of our population.
Right.
We probably do have over 100, maybe even 130.
Okay, because I guess the percentage, and we're rising rapidly, and this seems to be a thing. And I'm not that I'm against this. It's just that I think we need to keep an eye on that. I mean, we have a lot of retail opportunity here. We're losing our eclecticness, which is why people come to Calistoga. And all of a sudden, we're going to become homogenized with these wine tasting rooms, and that's a big concern. And I'm echoing the people that I know in town after 40 years are feeling the same way. So I have a bit of concern about the number of people. So how do we? Can you give me a little glimpse into the future if we continue to have these people applying?
We've talked about this a couple years ago when the item was brought up, whether there was a proliferation of wines in the downtown. And at that time, the Planning Commission directed staff to ask the City Council if the City Council felt it necessary for an ordinance that would regulate the amount of wineries in the downtown. At that time, when we forwarded the recommendation to the City Council didn't see that it was fit. Although enough time has changed that the Planning Commission could again suggest that staff carry forward a recommendation to the City Council, again asking if it's time for an ordinance that would reflect or limit the wineries in the downtown.
I certainly like the view of the other two commissioners here tonight just on that issue, because we have changed considerably since then, and it's been voiced in the community, so it's a concern, and I'd certainly like to get a response maybe from the other two commissioners if they're willing.
My suggestion would be, since that's not
That I agree. It's not
agendized item.
That's true. That's just it's informational. Maybe we can bring it back and
why don't you bring it up during commissioners' comment?
we can do that. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, that's fine.
Good idea.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's going to get too
No,
confusing.
I agree. Very well. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Wilkes, do you have any questions? Nor do I. So this is a public hearing. Anyone in the audience would like to address the commission, please feel free. Sure.
I'm Trent Garanghelli, and proprietor of Hybel Ranch. Our family's been in the valley for quite some time. I am a resident here in town. Look forward to hopefully this. If you have any questions.
Any questions of the applicant?
Do not.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Anyone else? Okay, we'll close the public portion and open it up to commission discussion, if any. Anyone have anything they'd like to add?
I'll just make a note that and notwithstanding Paul's comments, which I think we will come back to and talk about a little bit, but I do see a similarity in this application and the applicant with when we approved the Olabisi wine tasting. This is, it's a local, pretty much bootstrap sort of thing, and so to that end, I would applaud that sort of use where there isn't really another alternative.
Okay, I have nothing to add. Other than I would copy. So with that, someone like to make a motion?
Sure. I move that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution approving a use permit to establish a wine tasting and retail business at 1458 Lincoln Avenue, Suite 12.
I second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Good luck. Yes, could we get Carol back? Okay. Okay, we will move on to our second public hearing. This is Land Use Element Amendments, GPA 2015-1, the consideration of amendments to the land use element of the Calistoga General Plan. Staff report.
Thank you, Chairman Freddie. Because of the recently updated housing element, there is a need to also amend the land use element to maintain internal consistency within the general plan. While we were, of course, looking at the land use element, we noticed that a lot of the background information, data, was out of date, and there are a number of actions. There are 8 identified that we are recommending to be deleted because we have implemented them. We don't believe that a comprehensive update of the element is warranted since it was substantially amended in 2012 with the urban design provisions. We have tried to limit ourselves, but it's also a little bit of a cleanup. We did receive 2 comment letters and messages. One from David Moon Wainwright, which we provide to you with responses, and also from Kristen Casey. I'd like to briefly address Mr. Moon Wainwright's comments. His were primarily focused on the concern about deleting the uses of convalescent care, community care, and congregate care from the residential land use designations and allowing them only in the community commercial land use designation. And in general, he feels that these uses are no different than medium to high density residential development. We would just like to note that we are proposing to amend the low, medium, and high density residential land use designations to allow residential care, which is a very broad category according to state law. And in the memo that I've provided to you, I've given you examples that include small family homes, residential care facilities for the chronically ill, and residential care facilities for the elderly. Already in the related residential zoning districts, we allow these facilities for up to 6 persons as a permitted use. They don't even need a business license from the city per state law. Facilities that have 7 to 12 children or adults require the approval of a use permit. So we are proposing to just stick with adding the residential care category to the low, medium, and high density residential land use designations. We think those will cover what is now allowed basically in the land use element. However, we had further discussion in staff and thought that rather than using those terms, convalescent care, community care, and congregate care, and the definitions that are in the land use element right now, it's all very muddled and they're not lining up right now with state law. So now that we've considered it further, we're suggesting that those terms and those land use classifications be omitted entirely from community commercial. And we're suggesting that we add large residential care facilities for the elderly as a use that would be allowed in the community commercial land use designation, as well as skilled nursing facilities. And page 2 of the memo includes suggested definitions for both of those. So the large residential care facility would be basically be more than 12 seniors and provide services to them. And then a skilled nursing facility, and which is detailed there. So that is our suggested response to Mr. Moon Wainwright's suggestions. And then in terms of Kristen Casey's comments, hers were focused on the proposal to increase the minimum density in the community commercial land use designation from 4 dwelling units to 10 dwelling units per acre. We felt that this was reasonable because the type of residential development that we're trying to encourage or allow in community commercial would be higher density residential, such as apartments, townhomes, condominiums. 4 units per acre is really getting down to large lot types of uses. She was suggesting that this, community commercial is found at the intersection of Petrified Forest and Foothill, and that would be too high of a density right there, but really it only includes 3 properties out there: the gas station, the car repair, and Riverly Square, the commercial center. So we don't anticipate any residential development out there. So I've attached a map that highlights the areas that are designated community commercial, and they are primarily, it's the light blue that's primarily north of downtown. It's not really on the outskirts of town. It's also on the south side of Washington Street, just contiguous to downtown commercial. So yes, there is a little bit of outlying community commercial out at that intersection, but we don't anticipate any residential development occurring there. So we're continuing to recommend that the minimum density range be increased to 10 units per acre, so that if somebody does decide to develop a site, we're trying to promote obviously housing as much as possible, and we foresee that on some of the larger properties it could be a mix of commercial and high density residential, hopefully, with perhaps commercial on the front of the property, perhaps along Lincoln Avenue, and then the back side would be kind of a buffer between perhaps single family that's on the back side. Ms. Casey also suggested keeping the actions that we're recommending be deleted because they've been implemented. She feels that these are mandates in the general plan, and if we eliminated them, there would be no indication for future readers of the general plan that these continue to be important to the general plan. In the memo I prepared, we believe that there are either actions or objectives that still reflect a lot of these issues and concerns as were included in the original general plan, or frankly they've been implemented in terms of, like, for example, adopting community commercial and downtown commercial zones, and that's, that's a done deal, as is adopting a residential growth management system. So, this is kind of a cleanup thing. We haven't really gone through it comprehensively since 2003, so we have to report to the council and your body every year on what the status of implementation is, and it's kind of redundant to report every year. Yes, we implemented those many years ago. So again, we're just recommending that those be deleted, and we feel there's sufficient reflection of the concerns still in the general plan to address her concerns. She also brings up several general plan action items that haven't, in her opinion, been implemented, and they reside primarily in the open space and conservation element, which we're really not looking at tonight. So I did develop a response to each of those, and those are just offered for your consideration. Several of them refer to the Hillside Development Ordinance, which the city actually doesn't have. We do have a rural residential hillside zoning district, and we believe that those provisions in there and the fact that virtually everything in the rural residential hillside zoning district requires a conditional use permit or planned development, such as Calistoga Hills, gives the commission ample opportunity to address concerns that she's talking about in terms of tree preservation, views, light and glare, that kind of thing. So anyway, we don't believe that any changes are warranted in response to her comments. The remainder are, just suggesting to rename some of the plan development overlays, because I doubt that too many people know what the Maxfield Adams Beverage Company Properties Plan Development Overlay encompasses. Eric does, and I'm sure probably the rest of you know, but also renamed the Enchanted Resorts Properties Plan Development Overlay to Calistoga Hills to reflect the project's new name. There's also a whole section called Maximum Theoretical Housing Build-Out section, which was prepared in probably 2002. We've updated that in the housing element, and we believe that should be eliminated. Otherwise, I'd be happy to answer any questions about specific changes. I gave you a red line version showing you exactly where the changes are, and then a clean version is attached to the resolution. You would be making a recommendation to the city council to adopt this element. They will have the final review on it.
Okay, any comments, any questions of staff?
Lynn, just two questions. One, perfunctory. This also then updates to the 2010 census, correct?
I don't believe we had demographic information in there. That's primarily contained in the housing element.
Okay.
What Eric did was go through and update the existing land uses. So that's figure 1. And we also updated this existing land use distribution chart. But most of the demographic information is contained in the housing element, which we just updated with the 2010, a combination of 2010 census data, American Community Survey, and other sources.
The second question is in relationship to the letter that Reverend Moon Wainwright wrote and your response. And I read the letter and I read the memo with your responses in it. I just want to be clear that I understand the ability to allow the development and operation of these smaller scale care facilities within the residential areas is not affected by this new, not negatively affected, I'll say, by this new land use element.
Right. No, in fact, it's implementing it because we're putting in supportive housing, transitional housing, which is, for homeless or those potentially homeless, and residential care.
Correct.
Encompasses all of these things. So actually, we're implementing state law and the housing element.
The changes that you're working on that you will be bringing forward, that also would not be negatively influenced by this proposed amendment tonight.
Are you talking about the 2 additional
Yeah,
categories, use categories.
That's correct.
No, but they would be limited to community commercial. We felt that given their size and the types of services that they're offering, there could be a potential for truck traffic, and you're going to have higher staffing requirements the more people you have and the more services you're offering. For example, under
Right.
large residential care facilities, they could have all kinds of activities. Once you get larger in scale, you might have a linen service, you might have, it's just going to increase. So in order to, number one, protect the neighborhoods, also conserve the residentially designated property that we have, which isn't really a whole lot left, especially higher density residential. We felt that it was more suitable for the community commercial land use designations, of which we do have ample sites available.
Okay. And did you, in your responses, did you communicate back with Reverend Moon? Right?
Yes, I did, and he is here this evening.
Okay.
And well, he can speak for himself. I believe I satisfied him almost, I addressed most of his concerns.
Okay. I'm good.
But I believe he would like to see up to 20 patients allowed in the residential districts. I would prefer sticking with the 12 just because that's consistent with state law and for the other reasons that I just outlined. That it turns more into a commercial operation beyond that point.
Any questions by other commissioners?
Yes, you beat me to the punch on that one, Commissioner Wilkes. That was a good question. I had gone in earlier and asked the planning director the same questions, and I think that they were addressed well. I also would like to thank Kristen Casey and David Moon Wainwright for being involved and asking some really good questions, and as well as the staff and Lynn in particular responding so quickly. I think that's important in government. People seem to be put on the back burner, but not in this case. She got on it. She got back to the folks, and I think that will probably maybe be reinforced by Mr. Wainwright, get it right, tonight. But hopefully he'll come up and speak. But that's important in our community, I know, and I want to express my appreciation for both sides. Thank you.
Commissioner Bush?
I just have a point of clarification, I guess. The home plate area, I don't know, you called it something.
Riverly Square?
Yeah. That huge vacant lot in back of that, how is that zoned?
That is zoned R2. Is that what we just did? R2. Yeah,
Okay.
so that would be unaffected by this.
Right.
It's not commercially zoned.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, this is a public hearing, and we will now open it up to public comment, if any. Give your name and address.
David Moon Wainwright, down the street from you, Jeff. No, 1210 Pine Street. I do want to thank Linda and staff for responding quickly and fully, and I apologize because I misread one word because it was so close to a word that it's part of my life, and my apologies for that. The issue that I continue to just want to keep really in front of us is that we have an aging community, and we have a community where seniors want to move to. I don't know how they afford to, but they seem to want to come here. And the reality is that when I have one of many of my folks or just a member of our community falls and breaks a leg or something else, they are every way fine, but they simply cannot recover at their own home. They have to go down either to Napa or to Santa Rosa, essentially, to recover. There are no facilities here in this community. I hope that one day that somebody might be able to build a facility and address that. And yeah, I sort of think 20 beds is not too bad, personally. And I'll let you all work that out. I'm not going to push that too hard. I do think that 20 is not bad, but I do think that we need to be aware that there are not close services for these kinds of things. Santa Rosa is honestly, for folks who don't have cars, to visit family or to get over is almost impossible because there's no bus service. It's, it's very difficult. Napa is within better reach, but it's still a difficult thing. It's multiple hours of travel time and everything else. And we used to have a facility here. It actually was much larger. It had more areas of service before I got here than it did when it finally closed its doors. But these are things that we are going to continue to need. This community will continue to have people who will be dealing with dementia, will be dealing with Parkinson's, will be dealing with multiple health issues, as well as just basic convalescent care. And I just think I think what Ireas is doing and at Cedars and those kinds of smaller places are a wonderful fit for our community. And so I just really want to make sure that especially smaller places do not get pushed into commercial. That is just. I know that the language has been changed. I'm just saying, I really want to reiterate, please, let's hold that line strongly, because that, I think we can't be too vigilant in making sure that we keep people's dignity and where they live, even if they can't get outdoors, is a dignity issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else wish to address the commission? Okay, seeing no one else, we will close the public portion and open it up to commission discussion.
Yeah, I would like to, Reverend Moon Wainwright, I'd like to make a couple of points specifically to what you spoke of, just from my own experience. One is in my architectural practice, I've been involved for many years in doing assisted living care, Alzheimer's centers, those sorts of things, and I'm very familiar with the operation and the requirements for those sorts of facilities. And counter to that, I can also tell you that I live directly across the street from the Cedars care home. And I have watched the comings and goings and operation of that for 25 years. And it is specifically appropriate in the neighborhood, and the folks who live there are greatly benefited by the neighborhood they live in. On the other hand, in my involvement in more complex matters and in designing those for clients, I can tell you how inappropriate some of those things would be if it was across the street from me. And I would include in that, if the Cedars had 20 beds, I would probably have some indigestion over that, because there is a cost that we pay to our lifestyles in a residential area, just like we do because we live across the street from an elementary school. And so I think that, in my opinion, I think that staff has hit a good balance, and I think that it's a way to, to get both of what we need. I would agree with you in terms of the facilities that are needed, or certainly will be needed in the future, and I think that perhaps there's a lot of empty ground on the north side of town off of Lincoln that could begin to address those needs. So I'm not sure that we're not allowing something. I think that we've hit a good balance in that. So that would really be my only comment. Everything else, as I read through here, I would just like to say to staff that I think that the organization of the changes are very intelligently done, and I am very much in agreement with how you've put it together.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? I'll just make one comment. I agree with everything you said, and the ability to foresee needs. It's not the planning commission's charge. We can't go out and enlist people, business. It's even though the need is there and the need will continue to grow. I also completely agree with folks. The Cedars fits right. It works very well right. If it was, I believe they have 7, 3 times that with all the various needs, and I think staff has reached a balance, and also it's in compliance with state law, which is definitely worth having part of. So with that, would someone care to make a motion?
Sure.
Commissioner Coates?
I move the planning commission, make sure I get the right one here. Whoa, I get the wrong one. I'm in deep trouble here. I move the planning commission adopt a resolution recommending to the city council adoption of the proposed amendments to the land use element of this Calistoga general plan.
Second.
There's a motion and a second before us. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, and thanks for your comment.
David, there's still hope for me. I'm not quite, I apologize for the name flip, but I might get a little, I apologize. I might need that service sooner than later.
Okay, we're going to go to our third
just-
public,
Could I just note as
amended.
amended?
As
with
amended,
the-
right.
Okay,
okay,
per the
right.
Reverend Lutheran, right?
Okay, we're going to our third public hearing, which is the zoning ordinance amendment ZOA 2015-2. It's a consideration of a recommendation to the city council to amend the commercial zoning districts of the zoning code. May we have a staff report?
So we weren't contented with just changing up the land use element. So we had to delve into some of our zoning districts. This is something that we've wanted to do for quite some time. For an undetermined reason, both of the commercial zoning districts are in one chapter of the zoning ordinance. And it makes it extremely cumbersome when we're trying to use them and explain them to potential developers and people that are looking to find a space for their business. And so one of the primary things that we are recommending is that they be split up into 2 chapters. And none of the development standards are proposed to be changed. We're just simply like a housekeeping kind of thing, is to split them up. We also noticed that it doesn't really have a purpose and intent statement in the existing chapter, and we strongly feel that each zoning district chapter should have purpose and intent statements, so it provides guidance to staff and planning commission as to what we're trying to achieve in that zoning district, especially when we're faced with a use that's not listed, and we're trying to figure out whether it would be suitable. We're also proposing to include a reference to the applicable relevant policies of the community identity element, the character areas, the gateways, the entry corridors, all these things that were adopted subsequent to these districts being created. There's just, again, some housekeeping things. We want to rearrange the list of permitted and conditionally permitted uses so that we group the similar uses. All the commercial things are together, the residential things, etc. Proposing to delete the single-family dwellings as a conditionally permitted use. Those aren't allowed in the related land use designations. And I have in here add community care and congregate care facilities. What I would recommend is that we follow through with what we had recommended in the land use designations and do the same thing for these zoning districts. We would lose those categories and use the 2 that we were recommending. Also, another change that we're suggesting is to delete the use permit requirement for modifications to existing structures that result in an increase in the number of leasable spaces. We're not entirely sure why that is in there, but for example, when Copperfields wanted to split into 2 units, and put the kitchen store on one side, we had to come to you for a use permit in order to approve that. And we can't really figure out what the justification for that would be. We could see, on the other hand, if you were combining a number of small spaces into a large tenancy that would take up an entire block, the planning commission might be interested, because then you might be losing your diversity. But this has just the opposite effect. You're increasing the diversity. So we don't believe it's really necessary to come to you when somebody wants to split up their building and provide another business in that building. Let's see. Oh, one of the other things, there's this design, DD Design District, which is affixed to both of these zoning districts, downtown commercial and community commercial. And we find that it's duplicative of the provisions included in each of the districts, as well as the existing design review requirements. We believe it was a carryover from something quite a while ago before we actually had any kind of design review. But now, obviously, we have design review in place, and we think it's superfluous at this point. Just some more housekeeping about renumbering some sections, and there are some references still throughout the zoning code about the general commercial district, which hasn't been in existence for more than 10 years, so we'd just like to clean that up. So this would involve rescinding 2 chapters, adopting 2 chapters, renumbering a chapter, and changing references from general commercial district to commercial zoning districts. So it looks a little complicated, but and we think we'll have something that's a little more manageable. Again, I provided you with red line copies. I didn't do every single change because you wouldn't be able to read it, but just tried to highlight the main changes to you. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any commissioners have questions for staff? Please, feel free.
Lynn, 2 questions. One, in what you were just talking about in splitting up an existing space, the code calls for, in certain types of business uses, that they have to come up to the commission for a use permit. So if a space which has an existing use permit and wants to sort of subdivide their space and bring in a new tenant or whatever, if that new business would normally have been subject to a use permit, would it have to then come back?
Oh, very definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we were just talking about the physical division.
Okay.
In some case, like the kitchen store, that didn't require a use permit. I mean, it's a simple, right?
Right.
It's a simple
Yeah,
retail.
if the kitchen store had been a wine tasting place
Exactly.
instead.
Or a liquor store. Or
okay,
whatever.
then.
Yeah.
All right.
So, but again, this just says modifications to existing structures resulting in an increase in the number of leasable spaces. That has to come to you.
Okay.
So we would always bring something to you that required a use permit.
Second question I have, because this is it's delving in the zoning and allowable uses within the zoning code, and it goes through the whole laundry list of these businesses.
Yeah, tried not to touch them too much, but
okay,
yeah.
well, and the thing that I don't know if this at some point deserves a discussion or whether it belongs as a discussion in the zoning code, but I see nowhere in here any discussion or reference to the sale of firearms and ammunition.
Not specifically, no. We do make sometimes similar use determinations, or we bring them to the planning commission if there's something not specifically listed and we're not clear. I'm not a fan of these laundry lists myself, and I've written more modern zoning codes that have broad categories. But you're right, it's not listed in here, and I don't know that obviously with the concerns that would go with the sale of firearms that we could find necessarily it was a similar use to any of these. So if you wanted to add it as a conditionally permitted use, if you wanted to call it out separately, and I assume require a conditional use permit for it, we could certainly add it.
Well, yeah, as we move forward, I would be interested in hearing in hearing what the commission thinks, but with no mention of it as being needing a conditional use permit or none, it leaves a lot of stuff out there. And I
Right.
know that there are two businesses in town right now that sell ammunition, and they sell air-powered guns, but they don't sell firearms. So I'm interested to know what the thoughts of folks are.
We do also have, of course, a prohibited uses section, but I wouldn't,
Right.
I would hope you
And
wouldn't
I don't
go
know
there because
that
I don't
that's-
want to bring the
Yeah,
route.
and I don't know that the discussion is something that needs to be dealt with tonight, but
Well, this would be a good opportunity if you feel like you would like to call it out specifically, so that we recognize it and, again, include it under either permitted use or subject to a use permit approval.
right, thank you.
Well, my feeling is it's probably worth making a note. A business that specifically is going to be selling firearms should be
A conditionally permitted.
conditionally. And when that takes place, then it can be looked at. It can be more guidelines. In the cases you're mentioning now, the hardware store does sell ammunition and pistols. So I guess when I discussed this with staff this morning, it would eventually, if I guess it would be conditioned, it would not be the main emphasis of a store.
Well, you could word it that way, that the sale of firearms and ammunition would be allowed with a conditional use permit if it's accessory to some other use, so that it wouldn't be necessarily the primary use of the business, such as, at Ace Hardware, and I believe Ben's,
Yeah,
they
that's
also
my-
sell
that's my
ammo.
feeling.
So, it could be an accessory kind of use if you wanted to phrase it that way.
That would be my opinion.
I guess I could jump all over this. I guess the biggest thing in being here for so long is that we're such a small community. And so allowing this without a conditional use permit would be a very negative thing, simply from the standpoint is that if they did put it someplace, it's probably going to be in the wrong place. We're so small, and the effects that it could have on the people that live here, I think it's a very valid point that's been brought up. And I think that I agree with both commissioners.
The concern I would have is, the law requires that if you have firearms and you keep them in a locked cabinet. Well, if you walk into Ace Hardware, they've got all of their stuff sitting in a glass cabinet with a lock the size that I put on my suitcase. And it's pretty casual. They're not behind a counter. They're not in any way separated from the buying public. And I have some level of concern about that, even in this little town. So I wonder if that doesn't need some level of examination. And I don't want to hold this hostage for that, but it is a concern, and I think that it is dealt with here pretty casually.
Well, this wouldn't hold anything up if it was the consensus of the commission to add it as a conditionally permitted use. So that if we were faced with it, either, like I said, as a primary use, as a standalone business, and that's all they did, or as an accessory use as part of another business.
Well, my feeling is it would need to be a conditionally permitted use, regardless of whether it was the sole purpose of the business. Again, what I've seen is, to me, not adequate, and so I think that would warrant some examination.
Well, I think we're all in agreement that there should be a conditionally permitted use. Once that's established, if someone were to apply, then all of these other various applications could be discussed. So that if someone were to approach staff and say, what is the chances, or what's the feeling of my opening up gun shop. They could simply tell them that, well, one of our guidelines is that it's just an accessory to a business. I mean, doesn't mean that Carol Bush is then going to start selling little derringers.
Little pink ones?
But I do agree with you, and I have actually thought of that occasionally, the casualness of when you actually go into a real gun shop, they're locked.
Yeah,
You don't
it's a secure
see them.
facility.
Anyway, I think there is an agreement on.
If you may, oh, I'm sorry, Carol, go ahead. No, the lady.
Yeah, I just wanted to
absolutely.
make sure there
Go ahead.
was complete
Go ahead.
agreement.
No, I'm,
Oh, I just, maybe I'm one step further, I don't know. Okay, so if we were to agree to add this and move it forward, would we want to come back and make it, I'm trying to listen to what's saying, even more definitive then afterwards as a second discussion about how and what, if somebody came into the community, that these are the guidelines and the steps. We're not going to be, right now you need the permit, use permit. We're going to have to do that, right? But I'm wondering, does the commission agree we should bring it back as an item to be more specific about
Well,
security of ammunition, things like that? Tonight probably,
Well,
I'm getting where
yeah,
I went
Why,
with Jeff
yeah,
before.
why
right?
don't we
make sense?
suggest to staff that we are in agreement with this sort of outline, and in the next few months to come back to the planning commission with what they see as, from their side of the desk, workable conditions.
Yeah,
I would applaud that.
And-
I
and
was
then
hoping to bring that up under
flesh it
Commissioner
out.
comments.
No, I got that. I really
Yeah,
did. but
there's,
yes.
because we have no standards.
No.
And I think we need some level of standard.
Absolutely. So I think it would be
Yeah.
wise to have staff throw the burden on staff to outline some conditions,
Why not?
and then we could discuss it. And it would be a public meeting.
Yeah.
People who are interested could be there.
I'd just like to caution you that it's going to take a while because probably have to get some advice from the city attorney. I was looking at Lafayette's and they did end up in court over their regulations. So we have to tread fairly lightly. We can't go beyond what the state requires. So we'd have to see exactly
No.
how far we could take it.
But I think it would be a good beginning to decide that the planning commission is in agreement that it should be a condition.
Okay.
Yes.
With that, this is a public hearing. If anyone would like to address the commission, please feel free.
They're coming up. I would just add to the planning commission should probably acknowledge that we have to change several of the definitions regarding the residential care facilities, so that chapter 17.4
No, yeah, I
will be
mentioned
changed.
that we would just carry those
Got it.
forward. Yeah.
But there's also some other ones in there, group nursing and all those, so those will be
Right.
deleted
Yes.
too.
Be careful.
Diane Barrett, 1567 Centennial Circle. I just want to make sure that I understand, because I apologize to the commission and staff. I forgot until very late this afternoon about the hearing tonight. And looking at the zoning map, I just want to make sure that there are no changes in the current zoning designations on the map. It's just clarifying the element.
That's right. It's the regulations contained in each of the zoning districts. So there are no reclassifications of
Right.
properties. We
Right.
did that
Great, thank you.
months ago.
Okay, yes. Nice brief comment.
David Moon, Wainwright, 1210 Pine. Given your discussion, I just note that you don't have pharmacies listed in any of this language, and whether or not you want to hear the word dispensaries.
Thank you.
We do have a separate ordinance that talks about marijuana dispensaries.
Yes, we do. Dealt with that one. Okay, the public portion is closed, and if there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion.
I'll go. I move that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution recommending to the City Council the rescission of Calistoga Municipal Code Chapters 17.22 and 17.28, and the adoption of Chapters 17.21 and 17.22.
second.
Oops,
The
second,
motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
As
As
amended.
amended.
As amended.
As amended, yes.
Okay, motion passed. So we go to section H. Do any commissioners have anything they'd like to put on the table this evening?
I forgot where I was at.
Yes. Well,
Let's see.
Wine related.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I know, no, I was being, I guess I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't do that. I have something else on. Anyway, I do believe that I suppose when somebody just left, right, that we really need to look into this. We had a discussion, was it a couple of years ago?
It was actually about 4 years ago, I think.
Yeah, and there was a concern then, and we were going to just kind of watch and see. And I think the commission at the time felt that maybe this would occur, and it is occurring. And especially from all the things going on in the county as well, they put additional pressure on the cities, whether it's an application for a winery or.
You might note to Vice Chair Bush what you're talking about because she wasn't here.
Oh, I'm sorry. The I shouldn't say percentage of, but the number of wine tasting applications that we're starting to be. Word isn't prolific yet, but I think it's getting there. And of course, that takes up a retail space. And I know this is you've been here a long time as well as I have, and I think that we start to lose our eclectic values, and that we have different shops, different things going on, and that's what people like to see. We have plenty of wineries in the county, and there's plenty of wine tasting opportunities. But this is an easy way for a lot of these wineries in the county and different areas, families and things like that, to get their product out on the market. It's fine, but I just feel that's really not where we should be going with the number that we're getting, the number of applications we continue to get. So I'd like to see us move forward in the near future to address that.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I've asked that we do that before. So I definitely think it's time.
well, maybe it's time to have a public meeting. Just get an idea of what the general public feels. It's their town.
Well, it could be something for a mayor's forum, perhaps.
That's a very good
Yeah,
idea.
that could be.
That's an excellent idea. So,
Let's see if Chris can.
yeah.
In the county, it's sort of like environmentally, they talk about peak oil, and in the county studies now, we're basically at peak wine. We're now making as much wine as the valley can grow grapes. There's no more capacity. It would be interesting to hear thoughts, because I think of it, I can see sort of both sides of the coin. If there are everybody who makes wine needs the ability to have a tasting facility of some sort. The smaller wineries especially, that's pretty much the way they're selling their wine. And so if they have them at their own facilities, then we've got folks driving all over the valley from one to the other, tasting wine. We know what that means. Or if they begin to be more in town. I mean, it's a dual-edged sword, and it kind of hurts both ways. But and I don't know where the right balance is. So it certainly is a worthwhile discussion. And I would be very interested to hear what the general populace of the town is thinking about that.
Yeah, I think to suggest to the mayor that perhaps this is be a very good opportunity to just get a feel. I mean, it's happening everywhere. You go downtown Napa, although some of those places now are closing.
Right.
So it's a trend. Anyway, this is not the right time.
It can all go to Bank of America.
There you go.
Have a collective.
Well, interestingly enough, if you look at that commercial zoning map, we've got as much undeveloped ground in the northern part of town as there is downtown, and there could be an opportunity there to do something that was sort of site specific, of a development of tasting facilities where people can come and they can park once and they can do whatever they want, and it could be a magnet that begins to help matriculate people down a longer portion of downtown in that term. So again, I think that there's opportunities and there's great risk, and it would be very interesting to find out where the benefits and costs are.
No, I
Okay.
absolutely, I agree. I totally agree. We need to just have the discussion, and it is, I think Chairman Manfredi said it is, town doesn't belong to you or me, it belongs to
No,
all of us.
that's right.
And where do we want to go? But at this point, I think that it's time to have that discussion.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good idea.
Okay. Okay, do we have a director's report?
Well, I'd just like to report that we are going to have a second meeting this month, so come prepared on June 24th.
Okay, I make a motion that we adjourn tonight's planning commission meeting to the next regularly scheduled meeting of June 24th, 2015.
Second?
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?